Today, the land of the mascot platformers is pretty dead. Every once in a while, you get a new gem that makes a splash, or a reboot/remake drops that sparks a ton of nostalgia, but it's nothing close to what it was at its peak back in the 90s. You had Mario and Sonic duking it out for the top position at its highest tier. The tier below them was filled with great characters like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, Gex, and the Battletoads. But what made the 90s so great for mascots is the amount of tiers even below that, ranging from weird ones like Toe Jam and Earl to annoying ones like Bubsy. It got so wild that anything that could be animated was given a game. Even food mascots, Chester Cheetah, Ronald McDonald got games. Back then there was this weird Silver Surfer Pepsi dude running around, he got a game. The craziest one to me was the dot from the 7-Up logo. Yeah, this little red thing, they made this into a mascot and it got a game. And the craziest part of it all is that that game's actually not that bad. But out of all of them, I would argue no one embodies the 90s more than Earthworm Jim. The 90s animation simply has a vibe to it. It's wacky, crude, grimy, and imperfect. The more up, the better, I would say. And Earthworm Jim was exactly that. It had a Saturday morning cartoon presentation wrapped in a platformer video game. And he even got to be the man for a minute. They had toys, sequels, and he eventually got a Saturday morning cartoon of his own. So he was great back then. The question is, how well do his first two games hold up today? Does the grooviness translate, or are they just two sad old gross games? Well, I want to find out. So join me as I take a look at Earthworm Jim 1 and 2.
This is the story of Earthworm Jim video game. In outer space, a sweet evil cyber lost the Queen's cyberspace suit while it smooshes. Why not that slimy Earthworm Jim?
To emphasize how 90s this game is, if you just start playing, you might be a little lost as far as the story goes, because it just drops you into a level. There's no cutscenes, no story scroll, nothing. To get the story, you need to read the manual. Hi kids! Do you know what manuals are? I know games today don't even come with the actual game inside anymore, but back in my day, games used to come with an instruction booklet. Ain't that wild? They would have cool artwork inside telling you how to play the game, and in this case, it had the entirety of the story, where it says that Jim is just a regular worm having a normal day. A crow is chasing him, and he manages to get away. Meanwhile, in outer space, Psy-Crow, an intergalactic bounty hunter, under the orders from the evil queen, pulsating, bloated, festering, sweaty, pus-filled, malformed slug for a butt. Yep, that's her name. She orders Psy-Crow to take out a renegade ship because its pilot has stolen an ultra-high-tech, indestructible super space cyber suit. So he ends up blasting the ship to smithereens and the suit falls to Earth. But not only to Earth, it literally falls on top of Jim. The suit interacts with Jim and evolves him into Earthworm Jim, granting him human levels of intelligence and the ability to control the suit. Because they're looking for it, he then overhears Psy-Crow talking to the queen, telling her the suit is nearby. And the evil queen stresses how important the suit is because it will make her even more beautiful than her twin sister that they have imprisoned. Princess What's-Her-Name. Yep, that is her name. So Jim embarks on a quest to save Princess What's-Her-Name before Psy-Crow finds him and the suit. The game is a 2D side-scrolling platformer with run-and-gun elements. It's pretty simple enough. There are only 3 buttons, one jumps, one fires a weapon, and the other one uses Jim's own head as a whip. He can whip enemies or use his head to latch onto stuff to get across. He can also do the old helicopter move with his head to float. You can aim all around him, and there's a Mega Blaster that shoots one powerful single shot. So your goal is to maneuver your way around the levels to get to the end to face off against the boss. The platforming is okay. It feels a little tough to do things that need super precision, like when you need to latch onto something. Sometimes it just feels like it doesn't want to do it, but he also has a great range with how high he can jump, and then you add the whole copter element to it, and you feel like you can reach most places. And he's pretty responsive in grabbing onto the ledges. You will see a lot of Jim hanging onto stuff, hanging onto chains, and it felt like an itch I couldn't scratch not being able to jump while hanging. He can lift his ass to avoid getting hurt, but I really wish I could jump from this position. You can't jump while shooting either, so the same kind of feeling goes there, but these are just things I wish I could do. They don't really get in the way of the game whatsoever, because honestly, I don't think the gameplay is the main thing for this game. It's the experience of the levels. They're just so crazy, fun and unpredictable. Enemies are wacky and insane. This whole game just feels like a fever dream. The first level, you start off launching a cow for some random ass reason. This made me think that it was some sort of collectible or something I had to do throughout the entirety of the game, but no, you just do it the one time. So then you're jumping on tires, avoiding crows and doggies till you get to this fat guy who's on a crane throwing fishies at you. In between each level, you have a race against Cycro on a rocket. And if you lose, you have to beat him in a boss fight to move to the next level. And you get a nice little seizure at the end of each race too. The second level, what the heck, you're in a hell-like planet with this evil kitty dancing in the background. This level probably has the best music of the entire game. It starts off with Night on Bald Mountain, which immediately made me think of Fantasia, but then it cuts to a goofy tropical vacation vibe with crazy screams piped in. It's insane. So you get around the level using these crystals to move up. You then fight Frosty and a couple lawyers until you face off versus the cat outside of the suit. Then once again, in the suit, you have to take down his 9 lives. Then you have Down the Tubes, where you navigate through the level, opening gates and hopping on hamsters to chomp on these things that end up thwopping you if they grab you. You eventually make your way into a glass submarine where you have a timer. You need to get to the next location, and because the sub is made out of glass, you can only take a few hits before it cracks. Yeah, if this looks tough, is because it is. It took me some time to realize that these things right here even refill your time. Yeah, this one's kind of a pain in the ass. And you do all this for the goldfish at the end. Next, you have to go 3 rounds versus this Moko, where you're bungeeing and having to knock him to the side of the cliff next to you. Oh, and there's this one-eyed monster thingy waiting for you to chomp on the bottom. So you knock him to the cliff, drain his health, you do this for 3 rounds and you move on. Next is level 5, a spaceship-looking level with flying one-eyed Mokos that drop little worms after hitting them. There's escalators, there's a section where Jim is out of the suit, and the main villain that you don't actually fight in this level is Professor Monkey for a Head. That's his name, because he literally has a monkey for a head. And instead of fighting him, you actually fight Robo Chicken, who's a robot chicken. You fight him once, dropping shit on his head, and another time while falling. And that leads to Pete's Sake. In this level, you're a walking Courage the Cowardly Dog's lost cousin Pete, avoiding tentacles, lowering platforms for him, making sure he just doesn't fall. Because if he does, he turns into a ravenous beast that beats the dog shit out of you and moves you back in the level. This one also presents a tricky situation because you're juggling all these things at the same time. You're trying to get yourself across and you're trying to get Pete across, but it's manageable and fun. Now, if you're playing the Genesis version, you will next get Intestinal Distress. It's a pretty nasty level. You're moving along intestines and shooting out whatever the hell these things are until you eventually meet this nasty little guy that sounds like he's farting and burping on you the whole time. Moving along to the final level of the game, Buttsville, where you have to avoid these spikes as you copter down and avoid getting hit by these peas with horns and these centipedes looking things that just slice you in half with one hit. You avoid all this until you face off against the queen's literal ass and then the queen herself. I didn't even know this was the queen. It's just gross little creature thing, and this fight's actually not that hard, so when it ended I just felt a bit lost because after defeating her you're told you're the best and the game's over. You then get a cutscene of Jim fighting Princess What's-Her-Name, who offers a kiss, but before Jim can collect, the cow from the first level falls on top of her, making her fall into lava. My bad. According to the manual of the second game, this is actually slime. Anyway, Jim comes back for the crown and the game ends. There are no collectibles, but there is one secret level called Who Turned Off the Lights, where you have to maneuver through darkness. If you couldn't tell by now, this game is pretty crazy, and like I said, it has running gun elements, with most of it just being running and gunning. But the levels are designed more like a platformer, but an unconventional one. Levels feel very tangly, making it more interesting than just move towards the right. Health is pretty generous and it carries over between levels. The game can be tough in some sections, especially in your first playthrough, because at first it doesn't really feel like you're doing the right thing. The way you proceed feels off, especially in the boss levels. You just gotta keep doing it and trust yourself. Like when he's out of the suit versus the cat in the first fight, you just gotta jump and avoid the fire. I thought I had to jump up there or do something more, like there was more to the level, but that's literally it. You just avoid the fire and he eventually crashes himself down. Or in the final boss, you just gotta keep shooting her until she eventually dies, but it just doesn't feel like you're doing much. They do make noises like they're getting hit, but they just take so many hits that it goes on a little bit longer than you would expect. But how different enemies and bosses are level to level really keeps you on your toes on your first playthrough, because you just don't know what the hell you're gonna face off against next. The strength of this game really is this wacky charm. I don't think the visuals are timeless. They're just straight 90s. Him saying groovy after each level, the font of the congrats, his idle animations. The game shows a ton of personality, from Jim himself to all the wild little things like putting lawyers in hell. I love the sound effect of the guns, the snappiness of the whip, the noises he makes when he gets hit. There's a lot of little things that I really enjoyed from this game. Things are gross and crude, and I loved it. It's 90s nostalgia, and it's very hard to replicate. Even in its HD remake, as much as they tried, and some parts do work and look good, but I think overall it just looks too clean. I feel it needs to be more rugged and dirty. But speaking of different versions and ports and whatnot, I already mentioned the lack of intestinal distress from the SNES version, but it also featured ultra graphics and less sound effects due to the SNES lack of power compared to the Genesis. In fact, some levels have different backgrounds, like Pete's Sake looks completely different. Between the Genesis and the SNES version, I think the original version released on the Genesis is the best one. I prefer how it looks and how it sounds. It has the extra level, and I think even Nintendo agrees, because when it ported the game through the Wii's Virtual Console, that's the version it used. And that's the version that is still on the Nintendo Switch Online service as well. There's still many out there that prefer the SNES version, and that's completely fine. But I heard that the Earthworm Jim Special Edition for the Sega CD is considered to be the best version, because it features all the levels, plus some extra sections, more animations, a remixed soundtrack, and an entire new level. The only bad thing is about that version is that it's on the Sega CD, so it's not super convenient and easy to find. And if you do manage to find it, it goes for a pretty penny. But what do you think is the best version of this game? What did you play it on? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. We're down there. If you're enjoying this video so far, help me out by dropping a like and subscribing to the channel. Regardless what version you played it on, I think you're guaranteed a wacky, wild, and groovy ride. And back then, many agreed. That's why a year later, we saw its sequel.
Eat dirt, Psycho! This! It's Earthworm Jim blasting his archenemy Psycho! Oh, when Peter Puppy gets mad, he turns into— But first, a word about Earthworm Jim 2 video game! It's out there! Bouncing puppies, falling grandmas, hungry ant heads, and some really weird stuff, too!
Once again, according to the manual, after the events of the first game, Jim confesses his love to the princess, but him being a literal worm, she refused his love. Then Jim wrote love songs, lifted things, rode what they're calling a pocket rocket. He showed her his Elvis collection and his hefty bank account, and she then decided that she would be in love with him after all. Then Psycho swooped down and kidnapped her again, realizing as the only heir to her throne, her husband would become, as they put it, monarch of the galaxy, ruler of the universe, master of all, king of burgers, eligible for deep discounts at Zarware clothing for monarchs fashion emporiums. So Jim must stop him before they reach the Las Vegas system, where they can get a quick, non-consenting wedding. Visually, the second game still manages to capture the same exact vibe, and the personality of the first game is still there. In fact, I think it grabs the wacky dial and turns it all the way till it breaks off. Jim looks bigger, and he can't seem to sit still either. The gameplay is the same with the exception of an addition: Jim's buddy Snot. Snot can deploy a parachute and use sticky ceiling to swing. And to me, Snot felt a bit more precise than the whip when it comes to the swinging, maybe because you just have a larger radius to hit, so maybe it was psychological, I don't know. They added some more guns as well: a bubble gun that literally doesn't do anything, your normal plasma gun, a mega plasma gun, the 3-finger gun, electro guns, homing missiles, and the barn blaster that blows up everything on screen. The guns really do offer a fun variety to the running gun that I really enjoyed. The biggest difference between the games is that there's way more creativity to the design of the levels in the second game. It's not just run and gun to the end. Levels have objectives you must do to move along, and there's a lot of picking up and putting down, and a lot of dodging and floating and getting out of the way, and the levels are just simply way crazier somehow. The first level, anything but tangerines. There are some piggies that you must carry around and put them on slides and then use them as a counterweight to open doors. Then there are these grannies that you have to dodge as you're moving up a lift, avoiding electrical chairs, and getting to the end where he now gets to celebrate with a brand new animation. And instead of our iconic groovy, we now get a cow saying well done. I really broke my head trying to figure out, is this a pun on like well done beef or something? I don't know, it's just so random. I really tried to connect the dots here and I couldn't find anything.
Well done.
Next is Lawrence Soil. This one's pretty cool. You have an electric gun that you have to carve yourself a path with, racing to the end versus a stupid timer, but it's actually not that bad. There's a lot of clocks that you can grab that increase time. You fight this slug on a unicycle and move on. Now, instead of racing versus Psychro, every 2 levels you have the puppy love stages, where Psychro is tossing Pete's puppies out of a barn, and you have a marshmallow and you have to catch them and bounce them over to Pete. Psychro tosses them in different patterns, and you do this until he tosses a bomb, which you also must bounce over to Pete, where he then tosses it back to Psychro. I'm a duck lover, so I couldn't stand the splattering noise of the puppies when you missed. Every time I heard that, it made me lock in even more on this little mini game. As the game goes along, these levels get harder with more rounds per game and tougher patterns. Towards the end, it can be kind of brutal. But after the first one, the weirdest level to me is next, called Villy People. Remember the little weirdo burp fart guy from the first game? Apparently this is his old summer home, and to get past, Jim has to disguise himself as Sally the blind cave salamander. Again, the game itself doesn't tell you none of this, so you're playing and all of a sudden you just become this weird thing. You have your blaster still, you float around the level avoiding intestinal walls and getting hit by pinball bumpers. If you do get got by the walls, he does this funny scream and takes damage. There's floating sheep in the way, there are easy and hard paths to take, there are worms to collect that are then used for a random game show that you fall into that asks you gym questions that make no sense at all. Then you do a memory game with the bumpers that you have to jump on and move on. I needed a break after this one. I literally had no clue what the hell was going on. Next was the Flying King, where Jim's on his rocket and there's ships shooting fatties at you. There's muckle saucers that shoot muckles, and you must push this bomb on an air balloon to the end where the bungee muckle is waiting for you. I really struggled a bit on this level because my dumbass didn't know I could shoot for some reason. So I beat it, making it 10 times harder for myself. Here's me realizing I can shoot. Next is Utterly Abducted. This one you need to carry cows that pop out of flowers to get milk to raise gates to proceed. You start off trying to find one of them, then you need 2, then you need 3. Sometimes the cow is going to explode, so you must dunk it in a bath. But what annoyed me is that there's a sequence to them when there's 3, and I think I missed one, so I found this stupid cow in a flower, but he wouldn't pop up. Then you also have a saucer that's in the way, abducting the cows, that once it gets hold of it, it feels like there's literally nothing you can do. Next is Inflated Head. In this circus theme level, Jim's head blows up and you just float around avoiding light bulbs. And the cat from the first game is there being a pest. Then is ISO 9000. This is a paperwork planet with piles of paperwork, filing cabinets, masked lawyers, and furnaces, I think. You have to find these mice that are in these little balls and take them over to a shredder to power them on and then shred Jim over to the next section until you find this secret door that you have to chase around while this filing cabinet is being as annoying as hell. I really hated this sound because it was like loud and annoying over and over and over again. You find a way to stop the door and you move on. The next level is level 8. And as a fat fatty myself, this might be my favorite level. It's a planet of meats. There's a salt shaker chasing you. There are straws in the way. You platform along the level, jumping on bacon and salami, cracking eggs to walk on burners, and you end the level by fighting a piece of steak on top of a pizza. This is perfect. I felt this was ripped out of my dreams. There's a secret level that seems impossible to find in this level. It's like the only way you would find it would be by accident. It's called Totally Forked, where you run across bacon while dodging forks. This leads to the final level of the game. See Jim run, run Jim run, which is a race versus Psychro to the end of the level with walls and balls in the way. You shoot walls, you swing across gaps and dodge even more balls to reach Princess What's-Her-Name at the end of the level, where a cutscene plays where a taxi falls on top of Psychro and then they all turn out to be cows. After finishing this game, you have no choice but to think, what the f was that? it was awesome. It's so random that it feels like nothing makes sense because it really doesn't. The thing is, once again, most of the explanation for the levels comes from the manuals. And going by what it says there, I mean, shit's still bananas, but it at least has an explanation. That would be one thing that for me personally is missing from both games, is maybe some text setting up the story. I wouldn't have minded exchanging some groovies or some well done cows for some text telling me what the hell's going on. The game is still enjoyable without it if you accept the chaos, because again, the visuals and the vibe it provides is enough to keep you hooked. And the gameplay is so unique that that's what made it stand out from most game of its time. There's light differences between the Genesis and the SNES version this time around, with the SNES version having alternate backgrounds and the ability to switch guns, which I believe is a big enough deal to make that the better version. Again, let me know what you think, your thoughts on both games. Which game do you think is better? All that good stuff. Let me know down in the comments. I am really curious. I like the sequel more. It's somehow crazier than the first game. The levels are more creative, but I like how, although different from the level design standpoint, these two games aren't wildly different from each other from a tone standpoint. They really still go hand in hand. The vibe on both is so fun that I do consider both of these games must plays of the generation. If you have not, I really recommend checking them out. There's a reason why people loved them. It was so successful that a year later, it got its own cartoon. One that ran for 2 seasons and 23 episodes on the WB Kids block. It wasn't something that was just thrown together either. It had actually pretty funny jokes, slapstick comedy, and it featured some voice acting legends like Jim Cummings, who voiced Psychro, and many others in the show. And voicing Earthworm Jim was Homer Simpson himself, Dan Castellaneta.
Woohoo! A dream sequence! Groovy! Bring on that dancing girl!
After the show, we got Earthworm Jim 3D, which is so bad I might leave it for a future video on its own. Apparently that's what killed the franchise, because since 1999 there hasn't been a new entry to the franchise. It wasn't because of lack of trying though. In 2018, Earthworm Jim 4 was announced and it was intended to be a launch title for the Intellivision Amico, but since that console was put on hold, the game was essentially then cancelled. In 2021, a teaser released for a brand new show called Earthworm Jim Beyond the Groovy. It looked promising and got fans hyped, but then it was revealed that the show was promoting an NFT project, with many believing that that was its only purpose of it being made. So it sparked some backlash online, and this backlash was not handled well either, with the official Earthworm Jim account saying, if you don't like NFTs, just don't buy them, which obviously made things worse. So with no update since this trailer, many believe it's canceled and others say it's just put on hold. So the fate of the show is much like that first cow, up in the air. Hopefully they can figure something out and the right people get behind Jim with either a new show, or a new game. But it has to be done right in my opinion. Even this NFT show, although it looked really cool, it looked too clean to me. I think it has to resemble the Genesis graphics and gameplay somehow. You know, like games like Undertale, Shovel Knight, and Octopath Traveler have had success by replicating a certain style of visuals and graphics. Why can't it be done with Earthworm Jim and the Sega Genesis? Just like those games, a new game needs to capture the 90s style that Earthworm Jim is so synonymous with. I really think that Jim can only survive in that type of environment. If you take him out and you put him and make him all shiny and new, I just don't think it works. You know, it needs the same type of crude, nasty, wild 90s visuals with levels so random that don't make sense without any sort of explanation. And that's personally what I would want. You know, but that's just me. Honestly, I think I would take anything at this point because this is getting pretty ridiculous. Because how in the hell has Bubsy gotten a new game before Jim has? Now that's not groovy.
Remember me? Your old pal Bubsy?